And that's kind of where we came up with the idea. We would produce 2 or 3 statewide stories a day, 2 or 3 regional, and then we would do, 3 or 4 local, hyper-local stories. And because of the nature of streaming platforms, and because they know where you live, and because distribution to zip codes is pretty easy these days, now we can create a program that is tailored to where people live. And that's not something that you're going to get from legacy TV.
This is Small Press, Big Ideas, a podcast about the business of local news in the United States. I'm your host, Paul Gewertz. Small Press, Big Ideas is about the opportunities and challenges that local news publishers are facing for their businesses. I'll sit down and talk with journalists, entrepreneurs, nonprofit leaders, and more in the local news industry to find out what's working, what isn't, and how the local news ecosystem can innovate and flourish in the 21st century. All right. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by Todd Landfried, already messing up, the co-founder and CEO of N2 Media Holdings, and I believe the project that we kind of talked about before is called The Local, but that's part of N2, right?
Correct.
Okay. Well, Todd, thanks for joining me. We talked last week, but I'm glad to get this one out in the podcast too. So thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Happy to do it.
Yeah. As with pretty much every podcast, I'd like to kind of just set the stage. If you could just tell us a little bit about your background, your career, and leading up to N2, just to let everybody know a little bit about you.
Goodness. Well, let's see. Grew up in the Midwest, went to undergraduate school in Ohio, went to graduate school in Washington, D.C., worked as a Fed for about 8 years. There I did rural economic development for the USDA Extension Service. Part of my work there was we actually created, tell me if there's a business model here, a online bulletin board system that will help you find things to do in rural communities.
It's a great idea.
Literally, this is kind of fun. I literally was on a panel with somebody from AOL, and if you remember an organization called CompuServe, that tells you how long ago this was, talking about travel information and the internet and online services. And we were already doing something on the internet back then. And so I was talking to a guy at AOL, pretty senior person. And I said, look, this is really interesting stuff. I mean, this could really have a broad impact. And you were kind of looking at establishing a public-private partnership for this. And he literally says this to me, Paul. He says, "We don't know if this internet is really going to take off yet. We're going to kind of stick with the online stuff, the kind of closed loop system that we have right now. But thanks for offering." It's like, okay.
Wow. Yeah, that's shocking.
Yeah. But I mean, it's indicative of what's going on now in news, is because this is the way that we're doing stuff, and it's worked well for all these years. And don't come to us with something that's new and innovative, because we might have to change. So it's.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I was in radio. I got involved in radio first when I was in high school. I got back into it back in the aughts in Phoenix. I did a weekend radio talk show and turned that into a podcast. And kind of my conversations with people all around that was really what sort of lit the fire to create something that has turned into The Local. But it was a recognition back then that local news and the way that it was funded and the quality of the reporting was in decline, and something needed to be done. And back in the kind of mid-aughts, late-aughts, the big push was for nonprofits, because you wouldn't be subject to advertising whims. You wouldn't be necessarily subject to ownership whims at the time. So, we in the very early days, we thought about doing The Local as sort of a nonprofit. But what we just realized is that, some of those things that for-profits are subject to, so are nonprofits.
Right.
especially if regulators start saying, well, we don't like what you're saying. If they try to rein in how people who donate to nonprofits, in some way impacts their decisions on what they want to invest in. It was, it's, we just decided that, the way that we were going to build N2 was that it needed to be funded differently and it needed to be established across the country differently. And that's kind of where we started.
Yeah, it's funny how you said it's just hilarious. An AOL executive, like, no, they're going to stay in our walled garden for forever. That's how this is going to play out. And similar to a lot of news organizations, like, that's kind of a narrative that people have been around. Well, maybe the classified advertising will come back someday, or maybe it'll be back like the good old days. And it's just, not everybody's of that mindset, but there are still some folks stuck doing things the way that it's always been done. So could you talk about the local, like the model of what it is? It's like a streaming. I'll let you tell it, but just tell the audience a little bit about what it is, how it works.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I mean, the concept is really simple.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts with the premise of how do you pay for this? That's the big challenge.
Mm-hmm.
News is not an inexpensive thing. The way it's typically been done, if you're going to do TV local news, you have to have studios, you have to have anchors, you have to have sets, you have to have some form of satellite truck. If you're in an urban area, you got to have a helicopter, to film the car crashes and traffic jams and police chases. So, you wind up with a lot of very expensive infrastructure, and that becomes especially difficult to roll out into more rural areas of a state. And it's cost prohibitive, in fact, to do that sort of thing. So what we looked at was, okay, so where's the money? Who has the money to do this kind of thing? And so if you think about it from the context of a traditional newsroom, there's really nobody because of all of that I just described.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about news as content and you think about, well, how could we do it more efficiently? And how could we cover stories in broader areas without having all of this infrastructure expense and all the cost expense? So it's, there was a quote I saw from Ted Sarandos, who's the co-CEO of Netflix. And he said, subscriber growth, not ratings, drives our revenue. It's like, okay, so they're looking for content that brings people to the platform. How much are they spending on content acquisition? And back at the time, it was $8 billion, and that was a ton of money back then. If you think back 10 years ago. This year, I think they just announced in their Q4 25 report that they're going to spend $20 billion in 26. $20 billion.
That's crazy.
On content acquisition. Okay. So all right. So we found where the money was. And Netflix isn't the only one. I mean, Apple's not going to spend as much. Amazon's not going to spend quite as much. Disney's going to spend a little more. But anyway, you kind of see where the money is. Mm-hmm. And so then began like a question of, okay, so let's say we approach them with the idea of local news on any streamer. And we've had conversations with some of them about this. And the reason why they haven't done it yet is because everybody's talking to them about, well, you need to be something like a CNN or a Fox News or an MS Now, something like that. And that's not what they want to be. They're primarily an entertainment company. And so, but that helped us frame the idea too, in that, so one, we're on the right track by just doing a nightly news program, but how would we structure it? And how would we structure it in a way that's informative to the public, but it's also beneficial to the platform? And that's kind of where we came up with the idea of we would produce 2 or 3 statewide stories a day, 2 or 3 regional. By regional, I mean, 4 or 5 counties, areas. And then we would do, 3 or 4 local, hyper-local stories. And because of the nature of streaming platforms, and because they know where you live, and because distribution to zip codes is pretty easy these days. Now we can create a program that is tailored to where people live. And that's not something that you're going to get from legacy TV because they're licensed in a DMA. So, the example I use is if you're in Cary, Kansas, which is in the northwest corner of Kansas, your DMA stations are in Wichita.
Mhm.
That's 300 miles away. So no one is going to say that the local news in Wichita is the local news in Cary. So, this strategy and this allows us to produce stories that are relevant to that area of Kansas and then deliver it to them. And one of the questions we get, Paul, is just like, well, how can you possibly do this? It's just like it happens every day. We're talking about a total of 12 to 15 stories. There's not a TV newsroom in the country that can't do that.
Right.
And it's, all we're doing is we're just being much more focused. And so we're not doing the car crashes. We're not doing the bleed it leads stories, but we're going to cover the stories that really matter to people and then give it to them on a platform that they already pay for anyway. The platforms want them to show up every day anyhow. So we give them that appointment content that they'll then stick around and watch something else, which if you think about it, is exactly the same thing that the networks did for generations.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So it's just, we're not mowing any new ground here. All we're doing is really reimagining how it would work in streaming era. And we think we figured it out.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. It makes sense to me. It probably makes sense to a lot of people listening to this audience. Could you talk a little bit about how, like you said, you do some hyper-local stories, some regional stories, statewide stories. Can you talk about a little bit about the mechanics? Because some of the folks listening to this might be some of the people putting some of that content together. Can you talk about, I think you told me this on the first call, how that works, getting that content from like boots on the ground people, like I'm in Western Colorado, like somebody, like a reporter or a news outlet here, how that would get to the platform, how that works?
Sure. So we'll use Colorado as an example. So we divide Colorado into 3 regions. Basically, you've got the Rocky Mountains, and anything west of it is one region. You've got, you've got the Front Range that goes from top to bottom, and but we kind of segment it pretty much halfway in between the northern part of the state and the southern part of the state. And so we'll establish bureaus in Colorado Springs, in Denver, and in Grand Junction. And so out of there, we will have reporters whose job is to cover those regions. So they will go out and, they will have weekly and daily editorial meetings just like any other newsroom. And people will call up and say, this is what's going on. We'll know what county commissioners are doing. We'll know all the public meeting stuff. And then we'll just go cover them like any other local newsroom would. But if there are stories of, like, did a 3-day pilot and we posted all the videos on YouTube. So if you go to N2 Media Holdings on YouTube and look for 3 days of the local Colorado, you can see the stories. These are our pilots. But anyway,
I'll link to that to anybody listening. You can scroll down and find that. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, but if there are stories that are happening in more rural areas, what county are you in, Paul?
I'm in Montrose County.
Okay. So if there's something that people in the region or even the state need to know that's going on in Montrose County, and you happen to be the journalist there who's covering it, you might be doing it for a local paper. You might be doing it for yourself. We will work with you. We will partner with you, and we will pay you to help us produce the story. And then that story will then be part of the daily list of stories that people have access to on the platform. So it gives us a way to extend coverage into areas that we wouldn't normally have somebody. We're utilizing the people who are closest to the ground, who know the story, they know the players, they know the situation, they may have a history in covering it, and they are the most logical people to have covering the story, instead of trying to parachute somebody in and say, oh, well, this is what we found out in 4 hours, this is what we're going to reporting on. The other benefit too, Paul, is that because we don't have set breaks, our news programs are not going to be limited to 30 minutes. We don't have required ad breaks at 12 minutes or 13 minutes. So we don't have to do 12 minutes of local news, 4 minutes of weather, and 6 minutes of sports separated by ad breaks. If the story needs 2 minutes, it gets 2 minutes. If it needs 4 minutes, it gets 4 minutes. And what's important is the coverage of the story and producing it in a way that people at the end of it can say to themselves, and we talk about this in our development meetings, we want people to say, and think, maybe not out loud, but I learned something here. I am smarter for having watched this newscast. That's not something you can say for a lot of local news programs these days, because I'm smarter, I haven't watched them. But we can change that. And we can change it because we don't have the same kind of legacy mindset, the same, well, we only got 45 seconds for your story today. There was something happened, something breaking news that basically killed the story, so it'll never see the light of day.
Right.
That's not really a thing with us because the time doesn't matter.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Yeah, that's great. It just resonates so well, this model. Like I said, I'm in Montrose. The city's also Montrose. It's a town or a city of 20,000-ish people. And in Colorado, there's one major market. It's Denver. There's 3 million people on the other side of those hills over there. That's where, all the content is. We had a big controversy this last fall. There was a county commissioner here in Montrose who was, there was a lot of controversy around him. Basically, half the county resigned, didn't want to work under him, and he was going under a recall vote. And I mean, I was dialed in trying to find information about this. If I've been able to just, find it on my Netflix app or whatever, because I would never make the news in Denver or Grand Junction even, but it's hyper relevant to me. And
Exactly.
The people on the ground here that know the situation, like you said, could have been covering it and serve it right in there. Great stuff. So you also talked earlier and in our first call about, viewing news as content is the way the streamers kind of think about it. So I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about when you've talked to both either investors or streamers. I believe when you and I first talked, you said that, they're entertainment guys and they don't get this. You and I and most people listening to this get it. We get local news information, how important and relevant and wanted it is. But what's it been like having conversations with other folks trying to get this idea to kind of take off?
Well, it's been challenging, to be honest. Again, we're talking about doing something that really no one has contemplated before. But as you said, we think it makes total sense. It should be obvious for anybody who's trying to bring people to a platform every day that nothing does it more effectively than news, and particularly local news, because it's relevant to you every day. But it's some of them say, well, we really don't want to do news. Well, the reason why you'd think you don't want to do news is because the way that it's been presented to you or the way you're thinking about it is the way that it is every place else. And that system has definite flaws in it. And, I'm not going to go over all of them, but there's a bunch. But the main ones is that the quality isn't there, and the level of depth that the stories can go into is limited by time. And so what happens if you eliminate time? When I showed you the UI the other day, we provide information on who the interviewees are. If there are documents that we're using in the research or that are cited in the story, we give people access to it. You can't get that anywhere else. So it provides that extra context that helps build confidence and transparency into the reporting that it really is necessary these days. And, it takes a while for, typically, we actually it takes about 5 meetings before people get it, if they're in the entertainment side.
Right.
But it's a challenge to get them to see it, because they don't think news draws an audience. and it does.
Mm-hmm.
And there are tons of stories, not stories, but reports that verify that. Now, there was a story that, I keep calling it a story. There was a report that Evan Shapiro and, drawing a blank on the guy from TV Rev, Alan.
I'm not sure.
Anyway, but they looked at news viewership across the United States. And what they found, and this is based on a survey of 60,000 people, that the typical viewership, nightly viewership of local news was between 20 and 45%.
Jeez.
And that's a boatload of people. And now if you look at what Medill came out with their annual state of local news report, 50 plus million people in news deserts. They found 48 million people who watch news regularly, but there's 160 million total that are in some community where there is limited or insufficient local news coverage. And so what we're telling the people that we're talking to on the platforms is that, look, these are people who want a product that you don't offer. And if you do it the same way that everybody else does, there's no differentiating factor. There's no reason for people to go and switch brands, from new Coke to old Coke, vice versa, actually. But anyway, but you get the point. There's people need to think about the market differently. People are starting to think about it in terms of YouTube versus legacy TV versus fast versus TikTok, all those kinds of different platforms. But where we think they're making the mistake is that they're not thinking about it in terms of there are platforms that people generally go to every day or are more accustomed to going to for longer periods of time, and none of them offer a local news product at all. And that's kind of where we're trying to fit in.
I'm not sure if I asked you this initially, but can you talk about the streamers you've talked to? Like, Netflix is clearly the gold standard for streaming. They got first mover advantage and everything. Have you? I don't know if you could talk about it or not. Like, which people you've been talking about?
I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.
Okay, I don't want that. So.
Yeah, no, we really can't.
Okay. I thought maybe.
But we've had conversations with several of them.
Okay.
And they're kind of the ones that, God love them. They're at least listening.
Okay.
And they've given us advice on how to better build the pitch. And so that's why we've done storyboards. That's why we've done pilots. That's why we're raising money now to do a broader pilot. The one we did in Colorado was really kind of the first test of the model, but they're open to it. But they need to see that it's different, and they need to see that it's something that fits in to kind of what their concept of content is for their platform.
Yeah, I would. I was going to ask if they'd talked about doing a broader pilot. It seems like a no-brainer for them to try a statewide longer pilot or something like that, just to gauge, maybe in like a Texas or California. Maybe not. Maybe that's too big. They're like their own countries.
Well, no, it's our pilot model is built on Colorado, California, Georgia, and Kansas. So
Okay.
it's a pretty good cross section of the country.
Yeah.
But from your lips to their ears,
I'm not sure I have that reach to the streamer C-suite, but maybe. You never know. You never know who's listening. And I just wanted to say once again, like, you showed me the UI the other day. The actual product is so superior to any like TV. Like you said, you pulled up a story, you went in, and it showed the people you're talking to. There was one where there was like a court document. You could literally click and see like the court document on there. The other thing I really liked was...
You want me to show it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the other thing I like, just let me put this out real quick, is it's geo-targeted to you, but then you could enter the area the zip code, area code. Yeah, I forget which one. And then, like, I have nieces who are really good athletes in Nebraska. I'd be like, oh, let's see how their game went tonight, and like type in that and go see if it's on in their super rural corner of Nebraska. But yeah, let's see it, because this will go out on YouTube also.
Can I click share screen here?
Yeah, is it down on the bottom there? It is on my side. It looks different on my producer side and the other one. I'm not sure. I haven't actually shared a screen on this platform before. Huh?
I can't do it without ending the call.
That's frustrating. Sorry. I wonder if I can do it somehow.
Well, next time.
Yeah, sorry. I have not done that on this Riverside platform before, but I will link to, the pilot and any other, maybe if you have some other video inventory or something like that.
Well, what I would encourage people to do is if they go to our website, there's an explainer reel on the homepage. Just watch that. That's 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
But you'll be able to see the UI there. So that's probably the easiest thing to do.
Perfect.
So
I had sent you a question where I said, this seems like a no-brainer. How come nobody's tried it before? But I think you kind of answered that, talking to the streamers and everything who just don't get it or don't see it as content. Is that kind of, or have there been attempts to do this kind of thing with the big streamers before?
We've been at this a few years and we haven't found anybody who's thinking about it this way. I mean, if you think you have to understand how the legacy news media operates and how they're licensed. And because they're all regulated, they're licensed to a community. And so for them to decide that, okay, now we're going to take a bunch of money and we're going to go spread it out so we can cover more of all of the counties in the state it's not financially feasible. And plus, if you're talking about doing that, there's 3 networks typically in every DMA. So now you're multiplying that by 3. So what are they going to do? Are they going to say, okay, CBS, you take, central and northern Colorado, and CBS, you take the Western Front, and,
Right.
And ABC, you take, the Springs down. I mean, it's not feasible from their model or from their economics. So we don't have those restrictions on us. So it's much easier for us to do it. And plus, we don't have to satisfy FCC rules. We don't have to buy transmitters and TV towers and all that stuff because all the infrastructure already exists. We just piggyback on it.
You talked about news deserts there, and it got me kind of curious because it's a great way of serving news deserts. When you said, say, there's a relevant hyperlocal story like here in Montrose, and maybe it's somebody working for the local paper here or on their own. How do you find vetted reporters? Say to serve news deserts more, there's something that happens in the Nevada desert or something like that. Would it be somebody from a closer, a news established news organization a town over or something like that? Is there a way? Does that question make sense? What I'm asking?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a fair question. This is one of the things that we worked on with the Colorado pilot is to see exactly how this would work.
Right.
So it's, everybody's got a network. If you're in news, you have a network in your state of who's doing what where. And so we worked with Corey Hutchinson, of who I'm sure you know.
Yeah, I love his newsletter. Shout out Corey. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody should check out Corey's newsletter. But, he was invaluable. Carol Wood, who's on our team, she knows everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was fairly easy to just put some feelers out and say, hey, look, we're looking for people who are reporters in these parts of the state.
Okay.
And of course, we're going to vet them. Of course, we're going to make sure that they know what they're doing. But, there's a process to all of this.
Great stuff. So flash forward 5 years. Say you, I don't know, you finally have those 17 meetings with one of these big streamers and convince them to take this on, and investors, whatever the case may be, and everything goes exactly the way you think it could be. What's this look like in 5 years? Pretty much just how you described it. Yeah.
In 5 years, we hope to be in all 50 states. So, right. We hope we have bureaus established. We hope we have relationships with local newsrooms who are helping us produce these stories. And we hope we're in a very effective and very trusted news source throughout the country.
Yeah, it's, just partner if you can. That's obviously the hardest part is partnering with these streamers. If you can pull it off, this is just one of the best things that could happen for a lot of local news. Actually getting the information to the people that want it. So it's great stuff. Todd, that covered everything I had. We've kind of talked about where to find everything, but anything else you want me to link to or promote? I'll link to that pilot. your LinkedIn, the local homepage and everything. Anything else I'm missing?
Let's see. No, I would just, encourage people to look at the website, certainly take a look at the pilot stories and kind of see where we're going with this. So, are the pilot stories, did we knock it out of the park? Well, it's a pilot. There's nothing's perfect in a pilot. That's why you do them.
Mm-hmm.
But, we learned a lot. And I think the big takeaway that we got from doing those 3 days of stories in Colorado is that this will work. And it's not a stretch of the imagination to think that this is something that's just completely out of the realm of possibility. We can do it. We don't need studios to do it. We can have producers working remotely and produce high quality stories that people want to watch.
Awesome. Todd, thanks so much. I'm going to link to all this stuff. I'll let you know when this goes out, but thank you so much for coming on here.
Oh, you're welcome. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you have a good day.
All right, you too. Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you for listening to Small Press Big Ideas. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to help the show, the best thing you can do is to tell a friend or colleague and just take a few minutes to leave a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to right now. It only takes a minute out of your day, but it really does help the podcast grow and reach more ears. Check back for new episodes every Monday.